we've got John from Canada. His pronouns are he, him, and he says the necessity of God, and he can make an argument for God being necessary.
Sweet.
Hello, John. I like your name, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing good.
Pretty good.
What have you got?
Excellent. Okay. Before I make my case, I want to ask you a question. Have either of you ever seen the classic Twilight Zone?
Yeah.
Oh, years ago, yes.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like the classic Twilight Zone, like hosted by Rod Sterling, black and white.
Yeah, the originals.
Right,
Yeah. For sure, man. My favorite was I'm gonna spoil this, but if you haven't seen it, then it's on you guys. It's 50 some odd years old. One of my favorites was the soldier that wakes up, in the room, and there's only the clown and the ballerina, and then they find out their toys in a toy bin. That's great. Anyway, yeah. What you got?
Okay. Well, I'm referring to the episode You Look Like Number 12. Have you seen that episode? You see, in that episode, what happens is it's set in the future, and in this future, you see, in this future, everyone looks identical, exactly the same. Like every man looks the same. There are only two models of bodies for women, and the only way you can tell them apart is through a name tag, and plus there's no emotion. The point is, everyone is identical, and it was revealed in the episode that, like, when someone turns 18, someone has to go through this transformation to choose a body, and the reason why they do that is because they decided a long time ago that if everyone looks exactly the same, there'll be no difference between people, and then therefore there'll be no war, and there'll be absolute peace.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. See, the people who started this society had a good idea, but the result was they created a world where there was no individuality, there was no humanity, and the world was stagnant. Which brings us to the old saying, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions."
Right.
Okay.
Where are you going with this, John?
Yeah.
I love the Twilight Zone, so I'm happy to just spend the entire rest of the show talking about this. I'm just a little unsure as to where we're going. So,
well, what I'm saying is that what the reality or the future that's different in the Twilight Zone is what's happening today in the real world with this woke movement, trying to make everyone the same.
Right.
I don't think that is really. I'll be honest, John, and I sure could be mistaken on this. So please forgive me, because I'm not a part of every single social movement or political organization or whatever. But I very rarely hear anybody make the argument that everybody should be exactly the same, whether they're on any side of any argument whatsoever. In fact, there are very, 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 very select individuals and arguments throughout history that have been like that, and more of them tend to be on the like autocratic, like far right political ideology. Is that
okay? Well, do you believe that men and women are the same or different?
It depends on what you're saying exactly. If you're talking about in terms of like equality under the law, they'd be the same. But if you're talking about in terms of like down to molecular structure, of course, there's something different. Like, I don't know what you're getting at with that, John.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm trying to say is this. Would you agree with me that there are differences between people?
Yeah.
Yeah, I look at Elliot and I. We've got
we are different, even though we are both very similar in lots of ways.
Right,
we are both quite different. Yes, I would say so. So
exactly. Some people are taller, some people are stronger, some people are smarter. Right?
Sure.
Now tell me, would it make sense to treat two people who are different exactly the same?
Again, it depends on in what aspect you're talking about. Right. If you're talking about like, would it make sense to give somebody who's 7 foot tall a stepping stool to climb up so that they can achieve reaching a mug from a cabinet that is only 5.5 feet off the ground, versus giving somebody who is 4 foot tall the same step? Like, no, obviously that doesn't make sense, John, but it depends on what you're saying. Would I treat somebody who is at an IQ of 140 the same in terms of the right to defend themselves in front of a jury of their peers as somebody who has an IQ of 60? Yes. So like, what are you actually saying as opposed to just throwing out really vague,
Right.
weird questions like this? We're happy to talk about
Well,
it, man, but you got to kind of get
Well,
to the point.
What I'm saying, gentlemen, is that in today's world, as of 2023, society is ignoring people's differences, and they're trying to make everyone exactly the same. Like there's no difference. Like saying that.
Yeah.
Who
where
is
are you getting
advocating for that? Yeah.
I don't know what it's
Who
like
has
in
said
Canada.
that? Just name any one person. Just name any one person that has ever said the phrase, I
You're
want
all
to
gonna be
make
the same.
I want to make everybody exactly the same. Like,
Okay, well, if you have boys and men playing sports against girls, what do you
so
think?
you don't have an example. So you just I just
Right.
want to be clear on that. Like, I'm not going to harp on it and call you some loser or anything. I'm not going to do that, John. What I'm going to say though is thank you for acknowledging that you didn't have a response to that. If you do that, but so do you do or do not have the one example for the claim that you just made?
I'm talking of.
So you do or you don't? I'm sorry, John. It's just, it's weird. My headset is kind of fuzzy sometimes. I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly. You
Right.
claimed that a bunch of people are trying to make everybody the same in 2023. And I said, hey, just give me one example, just like one person or one article. And you refused to do that multiple times. And I just want to make sure it's you do or you don't have that example.
Okay, how about a biological male who played volleyball but against women?
So it sounds like you don't have the example, and it sounds like it's going to be difficult to
gave you the
congratulate you on being
I
an
just
honest
gave you the-
interlocutor here, John.
I'm just gonna
It sounds
mute
like,
for 1 second so
yeah,
you can carry
it sounds like we're going to have trouble in this conversation having a cordial and respectful dialogue where we listen to each other,
on. Mhm.
because it sounds like I'm asking a very specific question based on a very specific claim that you made, and instead of just admitting, hey, you know what, honestly, I actually don't have anything off the top of my head. Hey, no worries, John. I make claims all the time and I don't have an example off the top of my
Right.
head. But at least it's good to recognize that in conversation, because it shows that you're actually trying to have a conversation and not just like, I don't know, demean a whole group of people for some arbitrary bullshit. You know,
Right.
not that again anybody would necessarily make that claim today.
Plus, I think it'd be good to stick to the topic of the call as well. You called about the necessity of God.
Oh yeah, we got way off.
We got really off track. So I'd like to bring you back and just let's bring it back to where we originally were, John. And I think I forgot to unmute him. I'm sorry. There we go. Here we go. Now you're back. John.
Okay. The theory of God is that when you take God out of the equation, you end up with communism, and every time you have communism, you end up with death camps and the
Wait. The lack of God leads to communism? Is that what you're arguing? I just want to make sure I'm not, again,
atheism and communism goes hand in hand, gentlemen. Look, read your history books.
Why do you think atheism and communism go hand in hand?
Right.
Let's just start there. Just because I'm really deeply interested in how you got to that conclusion. Yeah. Like, just what is it? You're saying that because of history? Is that what you're saying?
If you read your history books,
I've read a lot of history books. Trust me.
Let me speak. If you read your history books, each time God and religion is banned from a country, like in China or Russia.
I just wanted to mute you in the middle of your sentence because I know where you're going, John. Because I feel very confident between the two of us. I feel very confident that you do not have the knowledge of history that I do. And I have the demonstrations to prove that. But here's what I'll say, which is super fun. If you believe that atheism and communism are intrinsically tied together in a historic fashion,
right,
it would be difficult to continue making that claim if, say, one of these ideologies let's say, one of these words, for instance, existed in the lexicon worldwide for 1,000+ years before the other. It would be a super big shame if one of those isms that you just mentioned wasn't invented until like the last couple hundred years and the other one had documentation from say 1,000 years ago. That would be like a super problematic thing for your viewpoint here because it would be hard to say that they're connected, right?
If you notice carefully, the first rule book in the dictatorship is banning religion. Why do you think there's no religion?
No, that's not true.
Or Russia?
That's just not true.
Yes, it is.
That's just not true.
Just
You know
give
that
me
the
an example.
Orthodox Church right now is one of the main things that Vladimir Putin uses to like force people to do stuff. Like the Nazis and the fascists in Italy explicitly use the church. Like this is what every single dictator has used religious trappings purposefully because they know how powerful it can be. Are there places that are both communist and atheist? Sure. Are there places that have been atheist and then went to communist? Sure. But there are bunches of places all over the world. Surprisingly, I know this may be shocking. There are places and people who are both religious and communist. I actually know a Muslim who is very particular about how communism and Islam are intrinsically tied together. So this just doesn't feel like it holds up. And it doesn't even really feel like this is what you're calling in to talk about again.
Right.
Like if you're saying God is necessary, okay, if you're not using the philosophical language for that, that's fine, but just make that clear because currently what you're saying is so nonsensical in a philosophical like discussion here. Because when we're talking about necessary, we're saying that it cannot possibly be another way. Like it has to exist in all possible conceptions of reality.
Mhm.
And it just doesn't feel like that's even where you're going. It feels like you're making the really wishy-washy, watered-down argument of without God, society crumbles. Oh, shoot. And funny enough, we had societies way long before we had Christianity. And we've got a lot of very prosperous societies that are increasingly going down in their religiosity.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this is just kind of it's just kind of similar to where you called in, where you just started asking these really vague questions, man. Like it just doesn't. It feels like you have a really specific point you want to get to, and you're just kind of dancing around
Right.
it. And
Until you could just jump in there and make
yeah,
it. All of
yeah,
a sudden we go, what? We weren't
oh,
expecting
no.
that. What? Have we lost you, John? Are you still
We
there?
might have. I'll shut up for a second. I promise, John.
Secular Rarity, John the Skeptic. I'd like to ask you a question. Do you feel
Sure.
that Christianity
Disregard all
is being imposed on you?
I'm sorry, I missed what you were saying because I was thinking about the Twilight Zone. Say again.
John the Skeptic, I'll ask you. Do you feel that Christianity is being forced upon you? Is that how you feel?
Do I feel like Christianity is being forced upon me? Personally, no, but I do have to be, as I was saying at the start of the show, I have to be mindful because apparently people's feelings get hurt if I say "God damn it" in a show. So it's not necessarily being forced upon me, but I'm trying to remain aware that some of my actions could offend people, be that in a good or bad way. Be that good or bad for me, sorry, not in a bad way. So it's definitely there and still has the it almost shapes the face of wherever I live at the moment because it's the dominant force. It is more people will kick off for me saying "God damn it" than they will for me saying shit in a show, you know. And that's because of their religion that they feel like that. So it's being forced upon me in that way. But do I feel like I have to suddenly become Christian? No.
Yeah. And I would say for me, I would say I feel like Christianity is being forced in specific ways.
Mhm.
So it's not that anybody is really shaking me down on the street corner and telling
Right.
me to convert, But for instance, just in my state particularly, there is legislation that is actively trying to enforce Christian ideas onto people who do not share those ideas and are of a different faith. Me personally, I'm of none, but imagine as you being a Christian, John, imagine if somebody was passing, laws that really focused on Hinduism and were forcing you as a non-practicing Hindu to adhere to certain ideologies that the only justification for is this is my religious belief. Like that would be imposing Hinduism on you as a Christian in this country. That is explicitly against what our country was founded on. I mean, it's in the Constitution. Like that was a big part for us. So that I would say in that way, but again, yeah, nobody's running me down on the road and
street.
yelling me. Yeah.
SR,
Not
become
yet.
a Christian.
Yeah, not yet. Maybe
Do it.
someday. If
Long to that day.
yeah.
You just got to believe. Was there a reason for that question, John?
Yeah.
Well, as a Christian, if someone is practicing Hinduism, or let's say someone puts Hinduism tenets on a wall, I'm not going to be offended. I'll still be Christian. But what
if the police do that?
Right.
What if the police precinct in your area gets together before every time they go out on a raid and they say, Jai Shri Ram, all hail Ram, all hail Rama, love Lord Rama? What if they did that?
I don't care. I don't care what the police pray, just as long as they protect me.
Yeah, but if they're actively praying to a completely different belief system than you, and you both disagree on very specific points related to what makes a person worth protecting, they're less likely to protect you because they disagree with what you think a good person is based on nothing more than their religious teachings.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's making the police less effective is this idea of defunding the police. Police need guns.
Defunding the police is a completely different conversation.
Right,
it's not the best terminology in the world, but the idea that it actually is talking about is just way too complicated and to get into. And honestly, John, it's been a pleasant conversation in some senses, but what I struggle with is why you are so unwilling to hash out a single point that you make. Right. And I think one of the reasons is because you maybe don't as strongly believe some of these things as you think. And what you're doing is you're just trying to shotgun a couple of different ideas all at once because there's this larger conclusion that you've got in mind that you want to get to. And instead of just going to that conclusion, we're just hitting these little pings off to the side because maybe one of them will eventually hit the target.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you just told me that you feel that Christianity is being threatened. Like, for instance, John the Skeptic, you just told me that if you said the GD word, you feel that you'll offend someone or you'll be fined. But keep in mind that conservatives and Christians, keep in mind that if we say something wrong against transsexual people, anyone from the LGBT community, we'll be fined. We don't have freedom of speech anymore. Or if you say anything against anyone against the left,
that's
we
just
get fined.
crazy. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's just nonsense. What you just said is just flat out nonsense. You can walk up and down the street and spout whatever hateful, disgusting rhetoric you want. You will be held accountable in the places where you are calling for people's violence, as some assholes do on YouTube or Twitter and stuff. You will be held accountable if you commit violence, and you will be, and that's in a legal sense. In a social sense, you'll be held accountable because you're an asshole. If you walk up and down the street and spout Nazi rhetoric and want to
Someone's
talk
gonna
about
punch you in the face.
somebody's gonna, yeah, I mean, and everybody has the right to say something to you.
Right.
I'm not advocating for violence or at
Right.
all, but yeah, somebody's absolutely going to hold you accountable on a social, and that's their freedom of speech. They have the right to do that, just as you have the right to walk up and down and say you're bigoted garbage. Like, you want to stand on the street corner in my town, do it. Get the permit, stand there, yell whatever terrible things you want to yell, but don't be surprised when all of your friends from high school go, wow, fuck him. Like, that's their freedom of speech too. It cuts both ways, man.
Okay, then how come during the George Floyd riots, no one got arrested, no one got prosecuted?
What is this? What is this?
What's going on here? Because you called in saying I've got some reasons that God is necessary, and now you're just going down all these different tangents, and it's I think we'd probably like to keep it on one level.
Okay,
hang on, John. I'm just going to mute you 1 second because just so I can just get my point. We're going to give you one more shot to give to us the necessity of God.
Yes.
Without all of these offshoots of you going, well, what about people's rights in downtown or whatever? Let's just go. This is why I think God is necessary, and then Elliot and I can go, we didn't see that coming. That's a really good idea. We'll talk about that. Maybe let's just try that out.
Gentlemen, God is necessary because you need an objective truth to have peace and order. If you leave it up to man, each man can decide for him or herself what is right and what is wrong, and then each person does what's right in her own eyes. And if a man decides that wrong is right, you end up with crime and violence and disaster. You need something objective.
That's a good argument. I understand. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It was coherent, and that's what I mean by a good argument.
Right.
I'm just going to counter and say that there are places in my home continent that are largely secular, that have very little crime rate, that have equal rights for gender pay, and everybody's making the same amount of money. Everybody's being looked after as the person that they deserve to be looked after as. That there is no God or religion governing all that. So I would say that's BS straight away.
And I would say without a God, we still can have objective truth. Like a God isn't necessary to give us that.
And the stats worldwide, which has just been pointed out from the crew, that actually, if you look at who's in jail, the amount of people that are non-believers versus the people that are believers is massively different. There are far fewer non-believers in jail than there are Christians and other believers.
Oops.
John Skeptick, what you just described is communism. And everyone being treated the same equally, and everyone being taken care of as dangerous.
I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. I genuinely, I don't have any response to what you just said. And the reason that I don't have any response is because what you just said was not a response to what either myself or John have said. Our John, our host.
Just call me the skeptic in this.
The skeptic. That's right. That makes sense.
I'll just be the skeptic right now.
Look. Honestly, I am in a boat now where I don't know how the fuck we got here exactly. No. And I'm just at this place of just really feeling like truly you're attempting to shotgun these arguments because you know that they just aren't great. Right. And you're just moving on from them. I think that's one of the most telling things in a difficult conversation, when somebody looks you dead in the freaking eyes. Now I know we can't do that exactly with our callers, but looks you right in your smug face and just goes, "Hey, what do you mean by that?"
Right.
And I can honestly tell you when somebody's response is essentially just to that doesn't bode well for you.
You know what though? literally did just happen as well with John. He just got up and left.
Yeah, I
He's,
did.
he's gone. He's gone. Thanks, John.
Yeah.